Good morning, everyone. My name is Falon. I'm the campus minister for the University Church here at Pepperdine. I am not our typical preacher, though it is always an honor when I get to speak and share a message with you all. Our typical preacher, Eric, our lead minister, is out today because he is in Abilene. Every year he helps with a retreat for students at ACU, so that's where he is, and I'm grateful that I get to be here in his place today. Fun fact about me, I'm a crooked person. In the actual literal sense, I have scoliosis. My legs are different heights and my shoulders are a little off. My eyebrows are different shape. My smile is crooked. And this is probably way too much information, but my nostrils are even different sizes. But thankfully, very few people are shorter than me, so almost no one ever notices that. But there's another way that I'm a little asymmetrical, and that is that my right eye has almost perfect vision. Like, I can see Laura, I can see George and Heidi out there. Heidi's so freaking cute. I'm so glad she's here. But my left eye is super blurry. I can't see Steve, I can't see Brad. I'm very, very near. My hand gets blurry about right there. I'm very, very nearsighted in my left eye. I remember when I came out of the optometrist's office the first time that I got glasses. It took a really long time for me to figure out that I was blind in one eye because my right eye compensates for my left eye. So unless I happen to go like that, I don't notice that I can't see super well. And I was sitting with my family one day, we were watching a game or something, and I actually got up and walked to the TV to look at the score. My parents were like, "You can't see that?" And I was like, "You can?" So of course they took me in. And when I walked out of the optometrist's office with glasses for the first time, my optometrist was in a strip mall. It was not pretty. And I remember looking up at the trees, and I was dazzled. I never knew how much brilliance and nuance I was missing because my left eye was not quite there with all the depth perception, right? So I was missing out to some extent on everything that I could see. I didn't know, though, what I couldn't see, so I had no idea what I was missing until I got glasses on. I've been thinking about my eyesight because our text for today deals with blindness. We're continuing our series from Mark in the lectionary, and we have led up to Mark 10. We've read multiple stories over the last few weeks. Mark 10, the very last passage, our text for today that Jake read for us, is the story right before Jesus enters Jerusalem. It's the very end of Jesus's ministry. The way that Mark tells the story of Jesus, this is Jesus's last miracle. Jesus performs no other miracles in the book of Mark until the resurrection. So this has got to be significant. And there's one other reason why this story is special. Even though blindness, healing the blind, is one of the things that we associate with Jesus, in Mark's telling of it, Jesus only does it 2 times. The first time is in Mark 8, verses 22 through 25. And this is a really weird story because it seems like Jesus messes up the healing the first time. It's at Bethsaida, and Jesus goes to heal the man and says, "Can you see anything?" And he says, "I see people, but they're like trees walking." So Jesus lays hands on him again, and then he can see fully. That's weird. There aren't any other stories in the Bible where Jesus seems to mess up or fail the miracle the first time, so this has got to mean something. If you look at the context, the story right before the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida is the feeding of the 5,000. The disciples witness this incredible miracle where Jesus takes a handful of fish and a handful of pieces of bread and multiplies them so that thousands of people's bellies can be full. Then Jesus messes up this miracle, seemingly. And then immediately after, one of Jesus' closest disciples, Peter, says, "You are the Messiah." It looks like Peter gets it for a second. He understands that Jesus is the Savior that we've been waiting for. And Jesus responds to Peter by predicting his death and his resurrection. I'm going to have to suffer and die, but I will be raised again. And Peter, who just identified Jesus for who he is, the Messiah of God's people, the Messiah of the world, says, Jesus, you can't say that. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. He has to rebuke the very disciple who just identified him for who he is. Right in the middle of that, we get this story of Jesus seemingly messing up a healing. But in context, Jesus isn't messing up at all. The blind man at Bethsaida, his healing story is a visual illustration, a tangible illustration of the disciples' spiritual journey. Every time they almost get there, they just don't quite see clearly yet. It's a trope in Mark, it's a theme in Mark over, just like Kat was saying, over and over and over again, the disciples, they almost get there. They don't quite get there all the way. They don't know what they can't see, and so they have no idea what they're missing. So if Jesus' first healing in Mark, when he heals blindness, is an illustration to help us better understand the spiritual journey of his followers, then I wonder if our healing story for today is doing the same thing. Let's read it again. Mark 10, verses 46 through 47. Jesus and his followers came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood still and said, call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, take heart, get up. He is calling you. So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, my teacher, let me see again. And Jesus said to him, go, your faith has made you well. Immediately, Bartimaeus regained his sight and followed Jesus on the way. Last week, Eric preached on the story right before this one. And once again, right next to a healing of the blind story in Mark, Jesus predicts his death and resurrection, that he has to suffer and die, and that's what it means to be the Savior. And then James and John approach Jesus when no one else is around, and Jesus asks them the exact same question that he asks of Bartimaeus right here. What do you want me to do for you? And this is how they respond. They say, appoint us to sit, one at your right and one at your left, in your glory. It's a pretty different response to the exact same question just a few verses later, let me see again. There are a lot of differences here. James and John are asking for something in the future. Bartimaeus is asking for something right here, right now, in the present. James and John are asking for something intangible. They really don't have a way to know that Jesus has fulfilled it in the present. All they could have is his promise in response. Bartimaeus is asking for something extremely tangible. We'll know immediately if it's granted. It's very evident. James and John are asking for something misled, sure, but really bold. We got to give them that. Thank you. Bartimaeus, he's asking for something, what? Obvious? Simple? Not bold enough? I don't think that's the case. I think Bartimaeus is also asking for something really bold. These are both really bold requests, even though they are different. We are meant to see Bartimaeus as bold. The whole story leading up to it is trying to get us to see Bartimaeus as courageous. In the ancient world, a blind beggar wouldn't have had a way to support themselves economically. They wouldn't be contributing to society. I bet Bartimaeus, since he went blind, probably seen himself as pretty worthless, because probably most people were seeing him that way. And we see that in the response of the people when he says, "Son of David, please have mercy on me." And they say, "That's improprietous. That's bothersome. Shut up." But he doesn't. Shouts even louder. "Son of David, have mercy on me." But his courage is different. But his context is different. The disciples have been walking with Jesus for 3 years at this point. They've seen so many incredible things with their own eyes. And they don't get it. They're still expecting Jesus to be a conquering warrior. No matter how many times Jesus says, "I'm here to serve, I'm here to liberate," they think he's here to conquer and to triumph, which is why they ask to sit on his right and on his left in his glory. What a place of honor. Bartimaeus doesn't know Jesus. He's never seen anything Jesus has done. This is his first time meeting Jesus, presumably. But he sees that Jesus is special, that Jesus can heal him. And then when Jesus fulfills that request, Bartimaeus does something amazing. He follows Jesus on the way. Now, this has a kind of dual meaning here. The way is both the way to Jerusalem. He follows Jesus along his literal journey over the next few days and weeks. But the way is also the name of what this movement was called for the first few decades of its existence. Remember that Christianity wasn't a separate religion from Judaism immediately. It was a sect. It was a movement within it, the recognition of the Jewish promised Messiah. The way of Jesus is less about right belief, though that's important. It's more about mimicking, walking in Jesus' footsteps, watching him so closely that we become like him. First, Bartimaeus has to see. That's a really bold prayer because it leads him on the way. There's another similarity, I think, between James and John's request and Bartimaeus' request. I don't think either of them really understood what it was they were asking for. Jesus says this to James and John when they say, "Let us sit beside you in your glory," and he says, "You don't understand what you're asking for. I'm going to have to suffer. I'm going to have to die." Are you ready for that? When I got my glasses, I was dazzled by the brilliance and nuance of the world. Within an hour, I had the worst headache of my life. And it lasted for weeks. Seeing what you're not used to seeing is a huge gift. But it can be really uncomfortable, painful even. There's a song that has lived rent-free in my head for about 12 years. It's one of the first songs that, when I became a Christian, really stood out to me, really resonated with me, struck me as bold. I think it lives rent-free in my head now for the same reason it stood out to me then. It's a prayer I feel scared of praying, but I want to. So the context of this prayer is that the singer is walking through a crowded place and seeing individuals and imagining the complexity, the brilliance, the nuance, the pain of their lives. And the chorus goes like this: give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the brokenhearted, the ones who are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see. Have you ever heard the term gaze following? Like, how strong right now is your instinct to look in the direction that I'm looking right now? Do you have to actively resist it? It's really interesting. It's stained glass, in case you're wondering. Gaze following is a social instinct we have to look in the direction, to follow the gaze of the person that we're looking at. We want to see what they are seeing because what they're seeing, we can assume, is important. When Bartimaeus regained his sight, the first thing he saw was Jesus looking back at him. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, it's actually not, as some songs say, everything else fades, everything else grows strangely dim. I don't think that's it at all. I think everything and everyone else becomes much more vivid, much more brilliant, much more nuanced. When Jesus is gazing intently at us, we can follow that gaze and see us ourselves the way that Jesus sees us clearly, like Bartimaeus, who went from seeing himself as worthless because he was overlooked to seeing himself as worthy, not burdensome. And we can follow Jesus' gaze to the people all around us. Everyone we meet, we can see them more clearly too. God's beloved, to whom God shows compassion even when they, like the disciples, just don't get it. Even when we, like the disciples, even when I, like the disciples, just don't get it. Bartimaeus gained his sight and followed Jesus on the way. He didn't know what he was asking for. And I bet he had a headache most nights when he went to sleep at the brilliance and the nuance of it all. He didn't know what he couldn't see. So he had no idea what he was missing. No matter how perfect our physical vision is, we too are finite. We know there's lots we can't see: microbes, microorganisms, bacteria on our skin, mites in our eyelashes, which I'm still not sure if that's a myth or a real thing, but there's a lot we can't see. Not to mention, we're petty and stubborn. We hate to admit being wrong. There's so much we don't know. That's a lot easier to say out loud than to actually believe in our hearts, because we don't know what we can't see, and so we have no idea what we're missing. I got contacts eventually. Got rid of the glasses. They just never quite looked right on me, probably because I'm crooked. I don't wear them anymore. It's too much of a hassle to put one contact in my eye when, for the most part, I can see just fine when I have two eyes. The headache's not worth it. Do we have the courage to ask God to open our eyes? Do we have the courage to see what God sees despite the inconvenience? Are we bold enough to see how Jesus sees? As we enter into the final couple weeks of a presidential election that has been rife with contempt and malice, It is clear to me, as I'm sure it is clear to you, that we do not see clearly. We have become blind to the brilliance and nuance within ourselves, within each other. And we have mistreated others because of it. Maybe an anonymous username on the internet, maybe a hypothetical threat on the other side of the world, maybe an infuriating human being right next to us who is also doing the best they can with the information that they have. We are all blind, at least partially in one eye. Do we want healing? Seeing the world with Jesus' eyes means seeing every person, every situation as brilliant and nuanced as it is. Seeing what we're not used to seeing comes with a headache. Or do we prefer to have plausible deniability? That we couldn't quite make out where Jesus was gazing. We couldn't quite make out the way in front of us. If we stay blind, we have plausible deniability. But the reality is, you, me, our neighbors, the world, it's all more brilliant, more nuanced than we could ever imagine. If we're willing to look up, if we're willing to bear the headache. May we be bold enough to ask Jesus to heal all our blindnesses so that we can focus on him more clearly as we follow him on the way. Give us your eyes, Lord. Give us your eyes.